Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Isabel. I am an event planner for the Reactor, joining you live from Sydney, Australia. Before we begin, we have a quick housekeeping. Take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are committed to fostering a welcoming, inclusive, and supportive environment. And we appreciate any kind comments, any supportive comments in the chat. Please go ahead and drop them in the comments. We will be monitoring the chat for any questions and throughout the session and providing them to the presenter and answering live. Our session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand within 24 to 48 hours right here on the Reactor YouTube channel. Without further ado, let's give a warm virtual round of applause to our incredible guest. Take it away, Ulrich.
Yeah, hello and welcome to this Microsoft Reactor session on best ways to integrate your SAP data into Microsoft Fabric. Thanks, Isabel, for introducing me and doing the introduction to the overall session. My name is Ulrich Christ. I'm a principal program manager at Microsoft in the Microsoft Data Integration team, and I'm responsible for all the SAP connectivity in our data portfolio. My background is actually, I should be cautious saying that it's a little bit more on the SAP side still than on the Microsoft side. I used to work for SAP for many years, and I joined Microsoft around 3 years ago. And since then, I've basically been focusing on data integration for SAP sources. So let's get started with the session. I would like to reserve a few minutes at the end to look into the notes or look into the comments and take your questions. I would prefer not to pause during the session and do this interactively because it just kind of interrupts the session and the flow of the session. So let's go through the slides first, and then we'll have some time to focus on some of the questions you might have. All right, and then with that, let's get started. So, quick introduction to our to Microsoft Fabric and especially the data integration capabilities. You've probably all seen this before, so I'll make this very short. Microsoft Fabric is the unified data platform for the era of AI. What does that mean from our perspective in very simple words? Of course, you can talk about this at length. Well, we offer basically a software as a service experience which contains all the capabilities you need to build a modern data platform for you as a customer or as a service, as a system integrator for your customers. But the platform idea actually goes beyond that. We are actually also a platform on which software vendors, ISVs, can build their own solutions, integrate them, and enrich our capabilities with their own solutions. We'll talk about that as well because it's also a relevant topic in the context of SAP data integration. So the capabilities, the core of Microsoft Fabric really is OneLake, which you see at the bottom, right? So it's the kind of a unified storage, which we also provide as a service. Think of Azure Data Lake Gen 2 as a service coming out of the box with no configuration. Once you launch Fabric, you'll get all of this provisioned for you automatically. It's unified in the sense that all the workloads which you see on top, whether that's data factory, data engineering, data warehousing, data science, real-time intelligence, or Power BI, they all can leverage the data in OneLake in the same format, no conversions between what one workload does into the format of the other one. So it's all unified. We store the data in Delta Parquet format. Each of these workloads can consume it. Each of these workloads can potentially produce new data, and there's no conversion needed. So you can freely exchange and leverage data wherever it gets produced in any other workload. So today we're basically going to focus on the data factory piece, and of course more specifically on the SAP specific capabilities we have here. So I'm not going to introduce data factory as a whole. We'll just straight jump into the SAP specific parts. So let's start with an overview of the strategy we have for SAP connectivity. And our strategy is basically based on 3 pillars. And that's very important to memorize and to always keep in mind. We have a very broad strategy for SAP data, and there's a good reason for that. I'll come to that in a minute. So the first thing, and that's an obvious one, of course, since Fabric is a platform, we want to provide the kind of 80% of the capabilities which customers need, especially in the context of SAP data integration, out of the box, right? So we are working to basically bring connectivity into Fabric, which allows you to integrate SAP data for let's say, all the standard use cases, whatever standard means, and I'll allude to that in a little bit. The current focus we have for that is basically, if you're familiar with the overall Microsoft data integration portfolio, especially with Azure Data Factory, where we have a lot of SAP connectivity, our focus is to achieve feature parity with Azure Data Factory. Right? So basically, all the connectors which you know from ADF, we're currently working to bring into Fabric. There's one exception, that's the SAP CDC connector. Some of you might have heard of that. There are some challenges around it from a potentially license perspective. At least that's how it sounds. SAP has some notes out there which say that third parties should not use the underlying APIs, and SAP is not going to be to support that. That's the reason why we're not bringing this specific connector into Fabric. But all the rest, all the other connectors, you will see in Fabric over time, and I'll also talk about the timelines we have for this effort in a minute. Second piece, and that's just showing the breadth of our thoughts and of our ambitions when it comes to offering SAP data integration capabilities. There's a huge partner ecosystem for SAP data integration. You might have worked with some of these partners yourself. You might have heard some names. There's plenty of names, and I'll show more detailed slides later on. So enabling this big partner ecosystem of well-established, proven tools which have been around for decades in some cases, 5, 10, sometimes 20 years of experience in getting SAP data out and moving it to some place. We're working with a lot of partners to enable their solutions to integrate with OneLake, and especially with open mirroring. If you haven't heard about mirroring or open mirroring, we'll come to that in a minute. Basically, that's the way how we envision change data capture at the moment for Fabric. And of course, there's a third important pillar, because whenever it comes to SAP data, SAP also has an important strategy, right? SAP has their own set of data integration tools. They have their own set of analytics tools. And a lot of partners use both worlds, right? So we have a lot of customers use both worlds. We have a lot of customers that use, for example, SAP Datasphere, or today still use SAP Business Warehouse, BW, for certain pieces of their analytics, but they also have a data estate in the Microsoft world, in Fabric, maybe in the Azure services, which we also provide. And combining these data assets is super important for many customers. That's why the strategy around SAP data always has to also take into account SAP's own strategy and integrate. And on this pillar, as I would put it, the third pillar, as I said, is integration with or alignment with the SAP strategy. We're currently working on a deeper integration between Fabric and SAP Datasphere, because SAP Datasphere is SAP's strategic product moving forward, now as part of SAP's Business Data Cloud, which is even a bigger announcement and a bigger product or solution which SAP is going to offer for data-related services on SAP data. So this integration is very important to us, and we're putting a lot of focus on that as well. So that's the high-level theme. 3 main pillars. Think of building connectivity, partners, and of course, alignment with SAP strategy. That's what you should always have in mind when it comes to understanding our SAP strategy. Now, let's have a look at the first pillar, the built-in SAP connectors. Where are we at the moment? Well, right now, the majority of the SAP connectors we have in Fabric are actually still what we inherited from the Power BI side or from the Power Query side. So we have a BW connector, which is more for CDI, so citizen data integration use cases, not mass data integration, but think of self-service, business users, more small-scale scenarios. So basically, whenever you need access as a business user, you need access to SAP data to wrangle with this SAP data to maybe match it or merge it with your own data sets. For such use cases, Power Query always has had a BW connector. This we've had in Fabric since the beginning. It's supported and integrated with Dataflow Gen 2, so you can use it to extract data out of a BW system and also land it in OneLake. You have the transformation capabilities of Dataflow Gen 2 as part of this solution. And by the way, and that's important to note because not many people seem to know it, you can also use this connector with an SAP S/4HANA. If you're familiar with SAP S/4HANA, it also comes with an analytic layer, which is similar to a BW query. And this analytic layer in S/4HANA, it's built on a on a slightly different technology, but it's under the hood very, very similar. And the connector, the BW connector, which we already have, basically allows you to get that to access that data and basically leverage it for CDI use cases. So as I said, not mass data, but the typical rather small scale, but flexible and very customized and user specific self-service use cases. The second connector, which we already have and have had for a long time, is the HANA connector. And this HANA connector actually has two flavors. So first of all, it has a flavor which is very similar to the BW connector, and basically the story around it is exactly the same. So it's around connecting to a HANA system, getting data out of a HANA calculation view, wrangling it, maybe blending it or merging it with your own data set. So typical CDI use case via data flows Gen 2 again for self-service use cases. But since it's almost a year, like spring last year, we also have an integration of this HANA connector into pipelines in Fabric. And that's exactly the same functionality, or let's say 90% of the same functionality as the HANA connector in Azure Data Factory. So this is the first case where we actually moved an ADF connector into Fabric, providing you exactly the same capabilities in Fabric as you know from the from the Azure Data Factory world. And in fact, using the HANA connector in pipelines is kind of the first built-in SAP connector, which gives you really mass data integration capabilities for large-scale scenarios with hundreds of millions or even billions of rows at scale, with all the flexibility and also a little bit of the complexity in quotes, which you need for Pro DI use cases, parameterization, all the metadata-driven capabilities, which you know from Azure Data Factory. All that is already possible with the HANA connector here. So let's have a very quick look at the HANA connector in both of these scenarios. Here you see a screenshot of the scenario for Dataflow Gen 2. And yeah, I forgot to mention that point. Of course, the HANA connector also works with SAP Datasphere, right? SAP Datasphere it typically stores the data on a HANA cloud instance. And you can use the HANA connector to actually connect to those to the tables or views in your HANA in your SAP Datasphere. So in this case, I'm actually connecting to a Datasphere instance and selecting some data from some view in Datasphere. And you see that with Dataflows Gen 2, you directly have the capability to massage the data. For example, here you see a column which is a date in the SAP proprietary format, which is actually a character-like format for dates with a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day. And Dataflows Gen 2 allow you to simply change the type and change this into a proper database date type, so that you can also use date functionality, date functions on top of that at ease. You also have the right formatting. You can do conversions between time zones and all of that very, very easily. So that's the experience in Dataflows Gen 2. And here's the other experience which I mentioned with the same connector, the HANA connector, in a pipeline. So here you see a pipeline in Fabric. The user experience is actually already very similar to what you might know from Azure Data Factory. My rule of thumb is if it's green, it's Fabric. If it's blue, it's Data Factory. Fun fact, I had a conversation with one of our engineering managers, so the people who really know both products, ADF and Fabric, really, really well. And we talked about this connector, and I was sharing my screen. And this person wasn't 100% sure at first whether I'm showing him Azure Data Factory or Fabric. As I said, green means Fabric, so I just told him, look, it's green, so we're talking about Fabric. But from a functionality perspective, he looked at the UX and he said, okay, are you showing Factory or are you showing ADF or are you showing Fabric? So this is exactly the same user experience, same capabilities as you have in Azure Data Factory. We have you define the connection here. You can define either to get the data out of a table or a view, or you can define a more complex query. And I'll show you in a second what capabilities you have with that. We also have some capabilities for mass data scenarios, for example, dynamic range partitioning, which basically partitions a huge data sets into smaller chunks and reads these chunks individually, one by one, so that we can scale larger data sets or partition larger data sets into smaller ones and make the transfer, first of all, parallel to a certain degree, but also more robust and more flexible. When you look at the details here, I'm opening up the query which I defined here. You can also use all the parameterization capabilities which you know, right? So you can basically add parameters to the where clause. You could even do much more complex stuff. You could do joins here. So you have a lot of flexibility here. Certainly goes beyond the standard capabilities of a business user, right? So it's really for pro DI, professional data integration use cases, works at scale, as I said, and gives you all the flexibility you need as a professional data integrator. And that's basically how the story is going to evolve on the built-in connectors, right? So as I said, our goal is to reach feature parity with Azure Data Factory for the pro DI use cases. We just saw the HANA connector, and I told you it's generally available in pipelines since almost a year. So that's a given. Next steps. There are two highly used and highly adopted connectors in the SAP world on Azure Data Factory. That's the SAP Table Connector, which allows you to get data out of tables in SAP via the application server. The HANA connector goes to the database layer, right? So that is in some cases, especially if you're using or running an SAP application like S4HANA, that's not permitted for some customers due to or depending on the SAP license and the database license they have purchased. SAP typically distinguishes between runtime licenses, which basically only give you access or don't give you direct access to the database. You can only access the database via the application layer, or full use licenses of the HANA database, where you can really also use ODBC connectivity. If you only have the runtime license, you might have an issue with the HANA connector because that might violate your license agreements. The table connector gives you similar capabilities, but connects via the application server and uses an RFC interface inside the application server to connect to the data. It's not as feature rich, right? It basically relies on some API which has certain limitations, so it can't do full-fledged SQL, but it's still more viable for many customers due to the requirement that it only needs the runtime license, not the enterprise license. And it's as I said, in Azure Data Factory, we have hundreds of customers, actually even thousands of customers adopting this connector and also using it at scale for large data volumes. So it's definitely a valuable addition to our portfolio, and it's going to come, as you see on the right-hand side, in Q1 this year. Q1 is almost over. 2/3 of it are over. So end of this month, early April, you should find that connector in Fabric. Same with the BW Open Hub connector. Those customers who are using BW know that this is kind of the official outbound interface of BW to the outside world, where BW basically, kind of dumps data in a packaged and in an incremental way into database tables, and from there you can fetch it as an external tool. Our BW Open Hub connector in Azure Data Factory, just like the table connectors, has also seen very good adoption with many hundreds or even thousands of customers using it at scale. So this is definitely some connectivity which we're also offering very soon. Timeline is exactly the same. So the current engineering semester, which goes until end of Q1, early Q2. This is basically the time in which our engineering team is working on this, and after that we'll make that connector available. There are two more connectors which we have in Azure Data Factory, the SAP ECC and the SAP C4C, Cloud for Customer connector. Both of them are based on OData. Both of them are built for very specific use cases and actually not the kind of mass use cases, because you probably know that OData is, in general, OData is not an interface for mass data transfer. There are some sources which only provide OData connectivity or OData endpoints to extract the data, so there's no other way. With SAP ECC, that's actually not the case, right? There are better ways to get data out of ECC or S4HANA than OData. ECC exposes and S/4HANA, they expose some OData services, so it's valuable to have such kind of connectivity and have OData access to these backend systems, but it's certainly not the standard standard way to integrate. And that's also what we see in terms of adoption. So compared to the table and the Open Hub connector, these two connectors, the ECC and the C4C connector, have much lower adoption. And that's also why we're still evaluating our strategy on this. For the moment, the generic OData connector in Fabric can be used as a substitute or as a replacement, as a workaround to connect to SAP systems, ECC, S/4HANA, or also C4C for such use cases, right? So just use the generic connector, and we are actually thinking about documenting how to do this best in the context of SAP sources. Long term, we are still evaluating whether we want to move them into Fabric or not. We'll see how the customer feedback on generic OData is. If customers are happy to use just the generic OData connector, that would of course make our life easier. Otherwise, if we see that customers are struggling because authentication is a little bit different in the SAP world and a bit cumbersome to configure with the generic OData connector, we might also consider to move these connectors into Fabric. We'll see. But that's basically a discussion which we're going to have moving forward later this year. So now let's move on to the partner ecosystem piece. And the story here is basically that we're working with a large number of third-party vendors who all have many years of experience in getting data out of SAP sources and landing it anywhere outside the SAP ecosystem. So you see the names of these vendors on the left-hand side. It's Microsoft, Asapio, DAB, Simplement, SNP, and Theobald. There might be more vendors, right? OneLake is basically an open platform, so to speak, right? There are publicly available APIs. Everybody can read the docs and enable their solutions to support OneLake. Probably there are more vendors in the SAP space already supporting OneLake, but these are the ones which are closely working with us and where we're in kind of close interaction and doing things a little bit closer together. Still, as I said, we're fully open. Anyone who wants to or is willing to also work with us, we're happy to collaborate and also put these people and these folks on that slide here. Now, how do these solutions work? Well, typically they require an ABAP add-on to be installed on the SAP source system, right? So you basically have some piece of code which the corresponding partner hands out to the customer and which needs to be installed on the SAP server, right? Once this is done, they basically add capabilities to get data out of SAP, to get change data out of SAP as well. So CDC is basically a pattern which all of these sources support, incremental loads, change data capture. And all of these partners have, as I said, enhanced their solutions to also support landing data in OneLake. So you get the full integration from your SAP source directly into OneLake with any of these sources, any of these partner solutions. They're all SAP certified, so certification is not an issue here. SAP is basically acknowledging that these solutions have, for example, no impact on the lifecycle management of your SAP source system. All the kind of checks which are done during SAP certifications, these partners have passed, and they've done that for many years, right? As I said, a lot of these partners have been around for 10, 20 years, sometimes even longer, right? And so the solutions are known to be robust, especially on the SAP side, where it's tricky to get the data out, right? This is the tricky part is actually to retrieve the data on the SAP side in a scalable and robust way. It's not so hard to write data into OneLake. So the integration with OneLake is actually a minor enhancement, I would say, but super valuable to have a rich set of additional capabilities from the partner ecosystem. The integration with OneLake for all these partners has been around since Q3 last year. So in September last year, maybe some of you might have attended the Fabric conference we had in Stockholm in September last year. At FabCon Stockholm, we announced readiness of these partners for supporting OneLake. And that's, as I said, a kind of a simple scenario, just reading the data and dumping it in files in OneLake. I'll show you how this story continues and evolves and where we stand right now. So this is the state as of Q3. status as of Q1, as of today, is actually different and much better. And with that, let's move on to the open mirroring topic. As I said, mirroring is kind of how we envision change data capture or synchronization of a source system with a data estate in Fabric. Right? So basically, the pattern is that we do initial loads in mirroring, right? So you trigger a mirroring flow. We start with an initial load and then subsequently fetch changes from the source and merge these changes with the sink. Maybe let's first have a look at, and I have to distinguish things. There's mirroring standard, or the integrated mirroring experience, and there's open mirroring. Let's first focus on mirroring, and then I'll indicate what the difference between standard mirroring or the integrated mirroring and open mirroring is. So in general, the pattern is as follows. You see that on the left-hand side here. We basically have a split of the synchronization process in two steps. The first step is that somehow data from a source is fetched via a connector here. So we are providing connectors for mirroring, which are capable of getting the change data feed out of a source, right? So basically, when this connector reaches out to the source at first, it will get an initial snapshot of the data and land this initial snapshot in a landing zone, right? Later on, the connector will know, okay, I've done the initial snapshot, so from now on, I'm basically going to fetch change data, only the incremental changes which have happened since the initial snapshot, fetch these changes, and again land them in the landing zone. And when you set up mirroring, this process starts, and at the same time, our mirroring engine, which does the horizontal piece here, also starts. So it basically looks into the landing zone, checks if there are new files of change data or also the initial snapshot, new files being landed, and then basically processes these files and synchronizes the tables in your Fabric warehouse. So what this basically means is, as soon as a new file comes in here, the mirroring engine will pick it up. It will check, okay, here's a file with new data. There are some inserts, some updates, some deletes, and it will basically perform these inserts, updates, and deletes on the sync table. So an insert will be inserted, an update will result in an update here, and a delete will result in a delete here, so that effectively, with a little bit of latency, because the data has to go from here to there and then has to be processed, with a little bit of latency, the source database, whatever that is, and the target tables here will be in sync, right? We will see exactly the same data set in the same state in both of these objects, here in the source and here in the sync. This mirroring capability is currently generally available for Snowflake, for our SQL databases, and for Cosmos DB. We put a lot of emphasis on telling customers that mirroring is free, which means we do not charge for any of the storage which is involved in mirroring. So the landing zone storage is free. Also, the storage here on the sync side is free. And the compute which is needed, both here on the connector side and also on the CDC side, on the mirroring engine itself, to basically perform the changes as they come into the landing zone, all of that compute is free as well. So we don't charge for any of that. Maybe let's run a quick video to give you an impression of how mirroring, the built-in mirroring capability, looks and feels. So you basically start creating, this is based in Snowflake, you start creating a mirrored Snowflake database. You select a connection to your Snowflake database. Inside Snowflake, you select which specific database you want to mirror. Then you get the catalog of the database. You select which of the tables you want to replicate. You assign a name to the destination on the Fabric side, and the mirroring engine starts. Here it says create mirror database, and now everything is being set up. Once the setup is done, you can jump into the monitoring experience. You see that the tables have been replicated. They're all in sync with the source. And then you basically can go to the SQL analytics endpoint. You see the tables, the replicated tables. This is now inside Fabric, all the replicated tables here. And when you look into the tables and, for example, look at the preview, you see that all the data has been moved into Fabric, and it's constantly kept in sync. As I said, the mirroring engine will make sure that changes are fetched from the source, and and are merged with the sink. So we'll continuously keep the sink tables, which you see here, the mirror tables in your Fabric warehouse, in sync with the source. So this is how the built-in mirroring works. So it's a built-in end-to-end user experience in Fabric. What we've done with open mirroring, and that's how we work with partners in the SAP ecosystem mostly, and also with other third-party data integration tools. We basically opened up the whole thing because we see that in the built-in mirroring, which I just described, we need to build connectors, right? So basically, we are limited by the resources and the experience we have to scale this. Whereas when we open this up, this mirroring concept to third parties, basically everybody who knows how to get change data out of any source can be part of that, and that's of course a pattern which scales much better. So how does open mirroring work? And you see the diagram here. It's kind of similar, right? So the high-level pattern is still the same. We still have a landing zone, and the change data feed is written into a landing zone. From the landing zone, our mirroring engine will fetch the changes and do the merge. Exactly the same thing. What's different is we don't write a connector which fetches the data from the source, but we basically specified the format in which we expect the data to be landed in the landing zone and made that publicly available. So any tool which complies with that standard, that specification, how we expect data to be written into the landing zone, can basically integrate with it, right? And that's exactly what the story which we're doing with a lot of partners right now. For example, we support open mirroring for Oracle databases via Oracle Golden Gate. So in that case, Oracle Golden Gate would be the third-party tool here. Golden Gate has adopted the specification of our landing zone format. So once you start Oracle Golden Gate and configure it for open mirroring, it will start pushing first an initial snapshot into the landing zone. Our mirroring engine will take it from there and write it into the sync tables. And after that, it will take incremental, or it will provide incremental updates which come from the source into the landing zone, and again our mirroring engine will take it from there. When you listen to what I just described from a process perspective, a main difference from an user experience perspective is that this is kind of a split thing, right? You configure the replication in the third-party tool. It's not out of the box in Fabric, as you just saw in the demo for open mirroring, right? Open mirroring is it's a two-step process where two tools are involved. You configure the replication in the third-party tool, but the later part of the demo is exactly, the experience is exactly the same. You will find the data merged into your Fabric tables, and when you go to the SQL endpoint of the mirror database, you will have exactly the same capabilities, and you can leverage the data in all of the workloads which we provide in Fabric. So that's the story around open mirroring, and that's also how I talked about Oracle. That's also how we do it for the SAP space. So all the partners which I mentioned earlier, DAB, S&P, Simplement, Microsoft, Asapio, Theobald, they're all working on that kind of integration with open mirroring, which basically means that all of these tools will be, and you already see the timelines, will very soon be capable of providing the data or providing capabilities or configuration in their tool that basically allows you to trigger open mirroring from their side and integrate in the way which I just described, right? So writing the data in the expected format, expected and specified format by us into the landing zone, and our mirroring engine will take it from there. The current state is, as of February this year, that DAB, Simplement, and S&P are ready. You will find them in our documentation. When you look for open mirroring in the Fabric documentation, you will see that there's a specific page on the partner ecosystem we have around open mirroring. You will see that these three partners are ready as of now, and they are onboarding first customers on that solution. And by, again, end of Q1, maybe very early Q2, so think of end of this month, end of March, maybe early April, the other partners are expected to be ready. We are actually currently planning the rollout and the go-to-market with these partners as well, and how to onboard first partners. So they're very close to also being ready for for open mirroring, which basically means that, let's say, a month or 6 weeks from now, you'll have 6 partners to choose from when it comes to doing open mirroring for SAP sources. A lot of customers are already working with some of these partners, so that's a very easy way to leverage their capabilities and their enhanced capabilities in the Fabric context. We also see a lot of customers interested in that solution as of now, who are not familiar with these partners but are really interested in getting in touch with them. We're happy to get you in touch. As I said, we're working closely with these partners. We're also collaborating on the first steps, right? So open mirroring is currently in the preview phase. So whenever a customer wants to onboard via a partner, we are happy to support that as well. We are in close contact with the partners, and whenever a customer needs help from our side or needs an involvement from our side, happy to jump in, look into issues, also get feedback to improve the experience and also improve the capabilities and the functionality itself. So that's the story here. And now I want to come to a slightly different aspect, but it also shows the power of open mirroring. It's a completely different solution, both from a mindset perspective and also from a commercial perspective. And it's something I only recently learned about. So it's basically an integration which was built by a consulting partner, a system integrator. And they are not even selling this solution as a standalone thing. They are just using it. That's at least the way I understand it. They're using it for their own custom projects. So whenever they go out to a customer who has a need to integrate SAP data with Fabric, they have built their own way to get change data out of SAP and integrate it with open mirroring. And the cool thing about this is, first of all, it shows that it's obviously very easy to do that integration, right? When I talked to this partner, they basically said, well, this integration with the landing zone and understanding the format and writing the data into the landing zone, basically the open mirroring integration, that was a matter of a week for them. So one engineer, 1 week to do that integration. The other interesting thing is, it also shows that if you're smart and if you know how to get change data out, you can very, very easily integrate your skills, for example, to get change data out of SAP with the Fabric platform. So our platform capabilities, combined with the expertise and the intelligence of our ecosystem, really add to something which is really fascinating. Now, this specific solution, and I'm mentioning the partner name here, it's not even a huge system integrator from the Netherlands. I put the links to their homepage here at the bottom. The way they are doing this is they're actually using SAP Datasphere as the engine to compute to calculate the changes. So what they're doing is they replicate the data from an SAP source into Datasphere, right? And then they have some custom logic running in Datasphere, which determines which records have changed or which have been inserted, updated, or deleted since the last replication. And that change data they expose to the outside. So they do this calculation, they determine the change data, kind of make it accessible. I don't even know how exactly it works, maybe via a table, maybe via a view. So they have some way to expose the change data to the outside, and then they basically have found a way. And that's also very simple. You can use notebooks in Fabric. You can use pipelines in Fabric with the HANA connector to get that data, the change data, out of Datasphere and land it into the landing zone. And once you've done that, the mirroring engine will again take it and mirror the database. So it's really the beauty of it lies in, as I said, the combination of a smart change data capture mechanism. So the partner really use their experience with the SAP ecosystem. They know a lot about the SAP sources. They know a lot about Datasphere and have found a way to determine changes using Datasphere's built-in capabilities, right? SQL views, the scheduling capabilities, the data flow capabilities of Datasphere. So all these built-in mechanisms you can use to determine these changes. And then they basically use some built-in capabilities of Fabric to get these changes out and integrate that with open mirroring. And as I said, low effort, at least for this integration piece. Don't know how much effort this here is. you can invest a lot in this and to make it smart, to also make it kind of slim, not to use too much resources on the Datasphere side, so that you can use a fairly small Datasphere tenant with that solution. Of course, there's a lot of ways to optimize. This is really where the smarts goes in, right? This is where the partner has invested a lot of thought and a lot of intelligence to build a good solution. And then the integration, as I said, with Fabric was a matter of a week. Very smart thing. You'll also see that soon on our partner ecosystem page. Now, the third pillar of the integration, SAP and Microsoft. What are we doing directly with SAP? Well, of course, there are ways to leverage SAP's tools to integrate with the outside world and also integrate with Azure. Unfortunately, there's currently no support in the SAP world with SAP's tools for Fabric. So there's no integration, for example, of SAP Datasphere, which SAP will always position as the way to expose your SAP data to the outside world, with Fabric right away. There are ways, though, to use Datasphere replication flows to land data in Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Right? So that's a mechanism where you basically use Datasphere as an ETL tool only, so you don't store data in Datasphere at all. You use Datasphere replication flows connecting to your SAP source system as a source and connecting to Azure Data Lake Gen 2 as a sink, and the data flows directly from your source system into Azure Data Lake Gen 2. Again, this supports initial snapshots and change data. Change data would basically create new files. So each run of a change run of a replication flow basically results in new files being landed in Azure Data Lake Gen 2. What's missing compared to open mirroring is, well, first of all, it's not landing in OneLake directly, but it's kind of similar to the first phase of mirroring, where you land the change data in a landing zone. Unfortunately, the merge part is missing, right? Because this is not integrating with the landing zone of open mirroring, but just dumping the data in ADLS Gen 2. The second piece is missing. So the merge, interpreting the changes and performing the changes as they come into a sync, that's not happening out of the box with that solution. If you want to integrate it with Fabric, there are, of course, ways to do that. You can, for example, use shortcuts from OneLake to ADLS Gen 2 to make all these files here available in Fabric. But when it really comes to doing the merge, there's no simple way. Again, you can now start thinking, and also based on what I discussed earlier, you could think, okay, maybe there's a way to use Fabric capabilities to get the data out of ADLS Gen 2 and actually put it into the landing zone to use open mirroring. Or you can also think about just writing a notebook which takes the data, the change data here, and merges it with tables. All that is possible. So we have a lot of platform capabilities which allow you to do the final step of the integration. But unfortunately, SAP Datasphere doesn't support the end-to-end story at the moment. It's not like we're not interested in a collaboration. I would love to see SAP as part of this partner ecosystem as well, right? So having a seventh partner and the SAP logo on that slide would be awesome from our perspective. Maybe we'll be getting there. So it's not like we're not looking into it, and we're also having discussions on that. But of course, these things take some time. Yeah, so that's the state if you really want to use the standard way of integration via SAP tools with what SAP calls premium outbound integration. That's basically this piece which I just described, where you use Datasphere as an ETL tool only. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of blogs about premium outbound integration. Definitely worth looking at. I mean, you should be familiar with SAP's strategy anyway if you're an SAP customer, right? Make up your mind how to combine SAP's tooling with our tooling. This is one option which SAP will propose. From our perspective, that's a perfect solution for those customers who want to go with it. If you prefer other options, I talked at length at all the other options we have available via the partner ecosystem, via the built-in connectors. For us, it's really important to provide options to customers, because the feedback we typically get from customers is that there's no single best way which works for all customers. Finally, when you look at the title of the invite for this presentation, I think the initial title was "Best Way to Get Your SAP Data into Microsoft Fabric," and it's just an S which is missing, right? I changed it to "Best Ways," and this little change actually shows it's kind of a symbol of how a small change can make a big difference, because I just said it, right? There's no single best way to do things. What we see from in terms of customer demand, what we also see when we're talking to partners, customers, everybody wants options. And that's exactly why we have this 3-tier strategy or 3-pillar strategy of building connectors, working with the partner ecosystem, and also working with SAP to provide customers with options, because there's no single best way to get SAP data out. All right, here's a video which is which shows how to use SAP Datasphere in combination with ADLS Gen 2. Maybe I'll skip that. It just uses the standard capabilities of Datasphere, connecting Datasphere to ADLS Gen 2. You will find such videos and documentation of that in the web. If you just do a search for SAP Premium Outbound Integration and Microsoft Azure or ADLS Gen 2, you will find documentation and maybe also videos showing this. So this is something which can be found anywhere. For the sake of time and to reserve some time for Q&A at the end of the session, let's maybe skip it and rather move on to a topic which is also super relevant, because it's not just about getting your SAP data into Fabric, right? You want to leverage the SAP data and derive value out of it. And for this, Microsoft actually offers end-to-end solutions as well, which really go from the data integration to the dashboard with all the data management in between. And we provide such solutions out of the box. These solutions are called Enterprise Insights for SAP, and they basically leverage the technologies which I was talking about. Sometimes you can combine multiple of the data integration options, which I talked about, with Enterprise Insights to really get an end-to-end experience up to a Power BI dashboard on top of your data. So, quick motivation for Enterprise Insights, and I'm not part of the team that works on this. We're closely collaborating with the team, because that's really where we can provide combined value from the Fabric data integration team's perspective to help them get the data in, and the Enterprise Insights team is actually taking the data from there and creating value out of it via multiple stages, from a bronze layer to a silver layer or even a gold layer, and then putting dashboards and other capabilities on top. So you're probably all aware of the complexity of SAP systems, licensing constraints, many data sources, high volumes of data, proprietary protocols. SAP is always special when it comes to protocols and technologies, right? Complex data structures, many tables, wide tables with hundreds of columns, complex understanding, sometimes, 5-letter German acronyms. I'm lucky, at least in that regards, to be German, so I get a feeling of what VBELN means, and I can memorize it because it's a cryptic acronym, but at least it is derived from a German word. For non-German speakers, it's of course much more complex, so I bear with you. Anyway, all of these aspects and all of these complexities, of course, making the handling of SAP data complex. That is why we have come up with Enterprise Insights, and Enterprise Insights really goes the whole way from the data integration over a full warehouse architecture with a bronze, silver, and gold layer. All the ETL processes that do the data integration and move the data across these layers. It handles all the complexity of SAP data. There's probably a slide later on, or maybe I skipped that additional slide, but it handles things like hierarchies in SAP, your cost center hierarchy, your profit center hierarchy. All of these hierarchies can be extracted from SAP and are transformed in a way that Fabric and Power BI can use them. Things like currency conversions, all of that is handled by Enterprise Insights and provided out of the box as part of the ETL processes, so that you get the data in a consumable format. We put Power BI dashboards on top, reporting templates, so that you can also see and visualize the data and leverage it right away. There's also a lot of documentation on this, so that you can not only use these these data models and these flows out of the box as they are, but we also describe how they work so that you can reuse certain pieces, you can modify them, that you understand how they work, and you can basically also learn from that. So it's the whole scope and the purpose of Enterprise Insights is manifold. First of all, it accelerates the use of SAP data and the time to value when it comes to integrating or to leveraging your SAP data, right? You can basically install this and you get access to your SAP data right away. You can visualize it out of the box. We know, of course, that this is typically not, or many of these, in many cases, this is not 100% standardized. Different customers have completely different requirements when it comes to visualization, maybe also when it comes to the sources. So all of this is, think of it as a template, right? It's not something which you can't touch. It's actually something which is a proposal or a template which you can modify as well, right? So you can adapt it to your needs. We also have teams that might support you with that. So it's really an accelerator in one sense, and also can be used, as I said, for educational purposes, so that you that you basically also can use it as food for thought to build your own solutions and maybe leverage some pieces of the functionality. What's the scope of Enterprise Insights? And you see that we're covering quite a lot of financial scenarios. We're also covering order to cash and procure to pay. We're working on customer relationship things. So basically, a lot of the standard SAP scenarios we already cover. You see some more detailed information on the right-hand side. So when it comes to the financials area, we have support for general ledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable. We do sales orders, deliveries, invoicing on the SD side, and also on the purchasing side, we have a lot of capabilities here. This is still growing, right? I think this is the current state of things. When I presented this slide a few months back, there were a lot of gaps here. I think we had far less on the procure to pay. So this is also rapidly growing. And as I said, it's there for you to use out of the box, to adapt, to learn. To my knowledge, this is not something we sell, but we provide it for free to our customers, so that they basically have a have a quick way and an easier way to really leverage SAP data as quickly as possible. Here's the high-level architecture. You see that we're providing the data ingestion capabilities into one lake. We also do the transformations from the silver to the gold layer, so transforming the data format into a star schema. You see the important things which I mentioned here. So we are creating or supporting hierarchies. You also see currency conversion happening there. So all the standard issues which you typically have with SAP data, we have solved here out of the box, and we're happy for you to adopt this. Solution, to my knowledge, as I said, is for free, so there's no cost associated with it. You can get in touch with us, you can use it, and you can adapt it in the way you need. And with that, I think I've reached the end of the presentation, and I would open it up for questions now.
That was a really good presentation, Ulrich. Thank you so much. I believe, let me see in the chat. So first thing I see is that one of our viewers noticed that there wasn't a mention of base tables directly for data extraction. So since it's fairly a straightforward approach, they would love to hear your thoughts on that. Are there any specific reasons it's not commonly used or recommended?
Actually, with both the HANA connector and the SAP table connector, this is those two connectors are exactly built for that purpose, right? So let me read carefully. You say querying SAP base tables in the database for data extraction. So if you really talk about connecting or connecting to the database layer. That would be the HANA connector, at least for S/4HANA systems or HANA-based ERP or BW systems. That is fully possible, right? So I mentioned, and I think I talked at length about the HANA connector. You can fully do that. As I said, it sometimes comes with license restrictions because not typically you need a full use a database license for that. So some customers are not, from a license perspective, allowed to do it. If you want to do it and if you have the right license, nothing wrong with it. Whether it's the recommended way of doing things depends a little bit. I mean, there are scenarios when you, for example, think about moving your SAP system to the cloud and moving it to RISE with SAP. You might not even get access on database level anymore, right? If the SAP system is operated by SAP, getting access via ODBC is maybe not even an option. But in principle, if you're running, for example, your SAP system on premises, have access to the database and have the right license, nothing wrong with doing it if it works for you, right? Yeah, that's all I can see here.
Great, thank you so much. We are running a little bit short on time, so I will just allow a couple more seconds for anyone else in our audience who might have any other questions. I think right now is the perfect time to drop them in the chat. We pretty much have an expert in this area who might be able to provide any clearance or, if anything else popped up during the session, I think now is the time for it. But if you happen to miss anything, any part of this live stream, this will be available on the Reactor YouTube channel in 24 to 48 hours for you guys to watch on demand and maybe, go back and rewatch certain parts of it. So just waiting. Let's see. Well, in that case, with about 3 minutes before the session officially ends, I think we will be wrapping up. But thank you so much. That was a very insightful session. I personally also was hooked out on it. Thank you so much. And to our viewers at home, thank you for joining us. And we hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.